When you think about super successful businesses that are selling through the roof like Heinz or Mattel, you think about a great product, a cool brand, and brilliant marketing. But there's a secret. The business behind the business making selling simple for them and buying simple for their customers. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout as Heinz and Mattel. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/promo, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/promo to upgrade your selling today. Shopify.com/promo.
We have to put Ukraine in a position of strength. It's basically turning Ukraine into a steel porcupine that is indigestible for potential invaders. The second element is that we urgently have to rearm Europe. And for that, I will present a comprehensive plan how to rearm Europe on the 6th of March when we have our European Council.
Welcome to Quiet Riot Midnight Mass with me, Naomi.
And me, Alex.
Well, we are recording this late on Sunday, having digested the Lancaster House meeting, Alex.
Yep.
I feel that we have to call the episode Steel Porcupine.
That's brilliant.
That wonderful phrase that Ursula von der Leyen had in her statement.
Yeah, that is... Sometimes you get those extraordinary quirks of translation that just become iconic. And Steel Porcupine, I think
totally.
Arthur Snell's next podcast should be called Steel Porcupine.
For sure. Well, I mean, look, we know what's happened. We knew what had happened late last night when we did the
Shall we give
script.
like a 3-sentence summary of what happened? So the schedule today, the choreography was this. Starmer had a telephone conference with all the Baltic states leaders. There was a little bit of disquiet that they hadn't been invited to the meeting. But
there was a bit, but I think it may have been a bit overstated, actually.
Yeah, because I would caution a little bit with that one. I'll tell you why. Because it originates from an Italian website that quotes an unnamed source. And then the British sources that repeated it, they have this code when they're talking about sources that they will include certain words like senior or, there's kind of a ranking. And this was just an unnamed diplomatic source. Right. So it could be someone quite low down.
Sure.
And the BBC touched on it as it's being reported by some that X.
But not that they...
But never picked up the report because they have a two-source rule, you see.
Yeah.
So I would say that the fact that BBC never picked it up probably means we should treat it for what it is, with a little bit of caution. Anyway, so telephone call, Baltics leaders, then meeting with all the European leaders that had been invited. A couple couldn't be there. I did notice, for instance, that Kyriakos Mitsotakis, the Greek prime minister, wasn't there, but I think his defense minister was.
Yep.
And I think Turkey also had their deaf min present rather than Erdogan.
Mm-hmm. But it was good that they were there. I thought that was definitely very, very important that Turkey were involved.
And I was really surprised and delighted that Trudeau made it across the Atlantic, because that hadn't been briefed. It wasn't entirely expected. And there had been a little bit of disquiet in some circles over...
And listeners, we're going to try and bring you a bit of a Canadian special.
Yeah, we're trying to find the right person. Yeah. Because also there's loads of stuff going on there with sort of Carney having entered that race and suddenly the polls just flipping. Yeah. So there's a lot to talk about there, and we're trying for a good Canadian guest to do that. So there had been a little bit of disquiet about Starmer kind of trying to play with a dead bat defensively. Any questions to do with Canada was seen by many to be a little bit of a betrayal, even though actually if you look at the full press conference, it was actually Trump that said, that's enough of that, and moved the questions along. So Starmer wanted to add more to the answer, but wasn't allowed to. But anyway, obviously, there has been either there were no hard feelings to start with, or there has been some fence mending, which was great to see.
Agreed.
And so they all gathered together. they came out with quite a unified statement that basically said, we will keep funding going to Ukraine, we will keep arms going to Ukraine, we will... aid. We will redouble our efforts to create manufacturing capacity in Europe. And basically, we are preparing for taking over our own defense completely independently.
Well, I thought what was beautiful, and I rarely disagree with the man, was what Donald Tusk contributed.
You have such a crush on him.
I do. I have such a crush on him. The paradox is that 500 million Europeans are asking 300 million Americans for help to protect them from 140 million Russians. We must rely on ourselves, fully aware of our own potential and believing that we are a world power. Beautiful. Correct. That is the right thing to be saying. I'm feeling buoyed by everything that's happened today, with the exception of Peter Mandelson, obviously now UK's ambassador to Washington. And I think he is not necessarily taking the Starmer line on things. Mm-hmm. So Mandelson says that Zelensky must give his unequivocal backing to Trump's peace plan. He said that a very radical reset is needed, and that President Trump is taking to end the war and bring a just and lasting peace in Ukraine, and added that the Europeans need to back calls for a ceasefire. And by the way, I think Ukraine should be the first to commit to a ceasefire and defy the Russians to follow. Now, that isn't the line that Starmer himself is taking. And Starmer is saying we mustn't burn bridges with the USA. And we mustn't. He's right on that. Because we have so many eggs in the American basket. But what the UK and Europe has to start to do, but particularly the UK, is to start moving our eggs out of that fucking basket and quickly. And I think today signalled the start of that. And hopefully we'll get the detail of it to follow. And I was very encouraged by how much the leaders coming out of today's Lancaster House meeting were focusing on ramping up Europe's own capability on that front.
Yeah, it's time to put our big boy pants on, basically.
Yeah. Because look, the only thing Trump and Putin understand is demonstrable strength. So that's what we have to show them.
Well, okay, so two things. I don't know that what Mandelson said won't have been cleared through Downing Street. It sounds to me as if it's for the person that's over there liaising with the White House, it is quite smart to be taking a more pro-Trump line. Remember, this is a sort of a tube of communication, and you want the closest bits to Trump to seem as friendly as possible to Trump. I may be wrong. I'm sure we'll find out in the next few days, because there will be briefings and counter briefings and leaks, as there always are.
Yeah.
But let's see what happens with that. I certainly consider it a footnote rather than anything significant.
And whether the choreography of that is as you've laid out or not, my own position is absolutely rooted in the fact that we have to defeat our greatest adversary in Putin, not save Putin from his defeat.
Sure. As you know, I agree. The question is the path to get there, and the path to get there will probably involve, and I keep saying this, I need people to be prepared for this psychologically. This will probably involve Zelensky eating crow at some point. It will be a really difficult moment. And he's already
started to.
I know.
You know, his immediate posts on social media following being booted out of the White House ceremoniously were pretty conciliatory.
But you know what a petty man Trump is. There is nothing that defines him more than his pettiness.
Yeah.
And so at some point he will demand that ritualistic almost moment of Zelensky crawling to him. And it will have to happen, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
For the good of the country.
Yeah.
The real danger for me is for Europe to relax at that point and take it as a sign that things are changing, that things are normalizing, and that maybe if, there's a bad midterms after 4 years, things will return to normal. Because this is the exact same mistake we made after 2020.
Yep.
Actually, halfway through Trump's first term as president, there were very strong voices in Europe saying, we can never again rely on the goodwill of whoever happens to be in the White House. And they were talking about this process that they called Trump-proofing.
Yeah.
And then Biden got elected and nothing happened. So that is the big, big lesson that European leaders need to learn. Regardless of what sounds Trump makes tomorrow or next month, whether he softens his stance, which he may well have to do, because domestically this has been an absolute disaster for him. It's gone down really badly. His poll ratings have taken a hit.
And Bitcoin, it's so beautiful.
Yeah.
Bitcoin has plummeted today.
That line of people standing in the snow, hundreds of people
in
standing
Vermont,
in the snow.
The most left-wing state in the country, Bernie
to
Sanders
protest J.D. Vance.
Telling him to F off.
It was beautiful, but beyond that, because, I don't want to talk about outliers or people who obviously dislike him or the town halls that we've seen going on all over America that are getting spicier and spicier. But beyond that, I think the fact that Trump made his way down to the lawn, to the press pack on the day and tried to spin it is an indication that they kind of felt they took it too far.
Yeah.
And the Trump White House has never employed traditional comms operations, right? That's just not their way. The fact that they've sent out verbatim lines to take and have demanded that every senator and Congress representative goes out there and repeats their support for Trump and how he's the only president to stand up for America, the first one to do so in decades, all that stuff that everyone is repeating verbatim. So the fact that they're defaulting to a traditional comms operations and sending people out there to spin it with a specific line seems to me a clear indication of panic in the White House. And I wouldn't be surprised if this is pinned on J.D. Vance, actually.
Indeed.
If this gets...
he wouldn't hesitate to throw him under a bus.
He wouldn't. If this impacts him in any way, he will just turn around and go, well, J.D. Vance.
And as we talked about yesterday, it was Vance that fucked it yesterday.
Yeah.
It was going okay-ish up to that point. And then Vance put his foot in it big time and sparked the big row that followed.
Quiet Riot. This episode is brought to you by Peacock. The new Peacock original documentary, Matthew Perry, A Hollywood Tragedy, dives deep into the beloved actor's rise to fame and his tragic death. 5 people, including Perry's personal assistant, 2 medical doctors, and an alleged Hollywood drug dealer known as the Ketamine Queen, were charged with conspiracy to illegally provide Perry with the ketamine. Explore the details of the case in this heartbreaking special, streaming now only on Peacock. Quiet Riot.
So the second thing I really like about this is that it sort of sets a very elegant trap for Trump. It's trying to snooker him or expose him on the world stage. Because for years he's been saying Europe needs to step up and take charge of its own defense. It is the stick with which he's been beating his NATO partners since his first term. He loves doing that. And he's been doing so in the knowledge that they're not going to step up and spend loads of money. So it's been his constant bluff. And now it's being called. It will be very difficult for him to turn around and get upset at Europe doing precisely what he's been berating them to do for a decade now, right?
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying that Trump cares about how this looks.
Yeah.
But the point is, the audience for this is not him. It is European voters. The more Trump is exposed, for example, in that Oval Office meeting, the more you get buy-in from the European public for this expensive and painful ramping up of expenditure and reorienting towards a different kind of philosophical positioning for the continent, right? You need public buy-in for this. And I think domestic politics tends to be forgotten in all this geopolitical conversation. but it's still really, really important. You know, all of those people gathered at Lancaster House, they have to go back home and face a domestic voting public next election round. And so it's really vital that Trump is either forced to play nice or exposed for the wicked bully that we all know he is.
Look, this is great. I think we're ending the weekend in a much cheerier position than we began.
As cheery a position as
we can be in.
Preparations for
Indeed.
World War III could be. I'm being hyperbolic, of course, but I thought the best point Starmer made during his press conference actually is that this sort of strength avoids conflict. And I think that is something that Europe, through its peace dividend and end of history years, maybe it is something that it began to unlearn a little bit. That
Absolutely. Alex, I always said through the referendum back in 2016 and onwards, the EU was the greatest peace project in human history. And we did not make anywhere near enough of that during the campaign, with the honourable exception of Gordon Brown.
We were laughed at.
We were laughed at. And Gordon Brown did one brilliant video where he walked through the ruins of Coventry Cathedral talking about the genesis of the European community and the importance of it and why it mattered. But beyond that, the campaign did nowhere near enough to make that point. We always said, you know, never forget, lest we forget. And here we are, 80 years on from the last World War, finally, Europe finding its mettle again and coming together. Somebody pointed out to me something that I found quite moving, that it was said NATO was created to keep the US in, Russia out, and Germany down. Now it looks like both the US and Russia will be out and Germany will be up.
That's interesting.
Right, listeners, we've got a lot coming up, as we said, in the next couple of weeks. Lots of extras. And as we recorded tonight, you will have seen very, very exciting news from Alex that the trailer for his new show, Andreou's Podyssey, has gone live. Please go and find it on social media. Subscribe to the show on wherever you get your podcasts from, available on Spotify, on Apple, there'll be an RSS feed.
Shall I pop links in the notes?
In the show notes of this show.
Tag the trailer to the end of this recording.
That would be lovely.
Okay.
And everybody, in these awful times that are so stressful and emotional and concerning and worrying, all of us need Andreou to read us a soothing bedtime story, and that is exactly what Andreou's Podyssey is going to be. So I'm very, very excited that Cooler Heads is able to bring you that show. He's put so much work into it, some amazing guests, some wonderful stories for you to listen to with a modern interpretation on each one, and how so many Greek myths and legends have applicability for us all today. And we don't need to look much farther than the White House to see examples of them. Narcissism, hubris, nemesis, the lot.
The first episode is about Narcissus, and that was no coincidence, let me tell you.
Well, bravo, Alex. Listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. We won't keep you any longer today, but we wanted to just give you our rapid reaction.
We really love you. And we loved the reaction to Sunday School, actually, which was truly wonderful. I mean, it always is wonderful, but it was kind of extra this Sunday, I think.
It was.
Because Naomi and I disagreed on a few things. And, you know, I was paranoid that it sounded like we were arguing, and everyone was like, no, it was really great to hear you respectfully disagreeing. And people were really taken aback by that edit of all the UK press pack questions. That really jumped out. And, you know, I always forget that because I watch news all day long. This was in the middle of the afternoon.
Everybody else has seen it.
I just think everyone sees this stuff. Everyone notices it, but it turns out not. So we really do appreciate you, and you wrap us with so much affection that it feels like we've created a little family, and it's a comfort to us more than it is to you, let me tell you.
We love you lots, and we'll be back again very soon. Don't forget, you can follow us on social media at Quiet Riot Pod, and you can help keep the show on the road by heading over to ko-fi.com/Quiet Riot Pod. For £5 a month, you get lots of extras, and it really, really does help us out and means that it's all worthwhile for us to carry on doing these shows. So thank you, and we'll see you again very soon. Lots of love. Bye.
Bye, and hang around for that Podyssey trailer.
Woo! Bye.
Quiet Riot.
Persephone and Cassandra, Atlas and Prometheus, oligarchy, plutocracy, satire, irony, hubris, nemesis, pathos, catharsis, sour grapes and blowing hot and cold, opening Pandora's box and leaving no stone unturned, the myths, tales and concepts of ancient Greece echo and reach into every aspect of modern life. Often misunderstood, frequently romanticized, and sometimes deliberately twisted. To understand their origins and truth is to get a real glimpse into the universal themes that connect us to the past and to each other. This is their story.
Άμα θέλεις μάνα δίρε με, άμα θέλεις μάνα δίρε με, πάλι εγώ θα βγαίνω στην αυλή για να βλέπω τον Αλεξανδρή.
Welcome to Podyssey. I'm Alex Andreou.